Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, dear friends, we are ready to start.
утренняя сессия произвела на столь
The morning session has apparently made such a big impression on all of us that it reminded me of a joke popular in the diplomatic community. As a person who has worked as ambassador of the Russian Federation to France for 5 years, ambassador of Russian Federation to Luxembourg for 2 years,
страны работали в качестве непостоянных членов Совета
and
Безопасности.
I remember the times when some of the countries were working as non-permanent members of the Security Council, or from time to time were heading the Council of the European Union in the countries that I worked. And this is the moment when we felt particularly acutely how our today's topic is particularly important for our continent and all other members. Now, why I wanted to mention the diplomatic joke. This session reminded me of a very old diplomatic joke, and the joke goes as follows. People were gathered at the conference, the people were representing different professions and works of life, and they started arguing which profession is the most ancient. Some of the women immediately left the room.
Журналисты заявили, какие
Journalists said, what doubt can be there? The one paying decides on the conditions. And the construction workers got offended and told them, remember, at first there was chaos, and we built this world order. And the diplomats laughed and told them, well, just let me remind you who led it all to chaos, who caused all the chaos of today's world. Well, the session we've heard yesterday were really exciting. We were talking about politics, construction, transportation corridors, energy sector, all of that is growing from agriculture. Just let's look back at the history of this planet. It all starts with agriculture and agricultural production. The necessity to grow, produce, to feed people, to trade, to build, all of that starts from agriculture and processing of agricultural products. Yesterday, there was a great joke shared. From one hell, we moved to another. Centuries have passed and agricultural business is still hell. You need to be able to strive in deserts, in floods, in droughts. You need to be able to grow harvest in the modern economy that is horrendous when the difference between the prices for the commodity, for the raw materials, and the end product that consumer buys amounts to hundreds of times. You need to take into account economic environment, sanctions, distortion of supply chains, and so on and so forth. How can one survive in this hell, if I may say so? And this is what we're going to discuss with our today's speakers, heads of large agricultural holdings and companies. How do they manage to survive and thrive, to feed the humankind and deliver on the program that was initially defined by the great Roman Empire, asking for bread and spectacles? Now, let us start, and it is my great pleasure to give the floor to Eren Günhan Ulusoy, chairman of the board of the Ulusoy company, that is the Turkish and global enterprise in the area. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, dear guests, participants. This is Günhan Ulusoy, chairman of the board Ulusoy Flour Mills, the leading flour company in Turkey, and as well as International Association of Operating Millers, Euro-Asia director. I'm since 2019 NGO of flour millers over the 32 countries in Euro-Asia. So today my presentation plan is giving some macros about the global grain production, what is the trends, efficiency, then come back to Turkey about what flour milling plays role in the food security of the world under these changing climate change environment. Then to micro, what we do in my company against reaction to this challenge. Yeah. In this first slide, you see that despite the global crop area for grains is in the left hand is the total agricultural product and right hand is the grains. You see, despite the area is increasing, per capita area is decreasing steadily. So our population is, world population is increasing more than what we can cultivate every year more. Yeah, that looks like a very bad news, which when we talk about food crisis, yeah, that's the fundamental reason for that. But there are good news as well. Despite this area is not matching the population increase, the world grain production steadily rising. And this year, there is another historical record of 2.4 billion tons of grain productions over the world, especially led by corn production increase. So that despite we are talking about supply chain shocks, logistic problems, the conflicts, still world grain production is increasing. So how we can do that? Thanks to the yields. From a certain amount of area, we can crop more yields. When you look for the corn, it is a bit more faster increase. For wheat coming after that, all the yields are increasing steadily. So when we look a bit closer to the wheat, my industry and the source of bread, especially in Middle East, as well as Russia, the bread is the main staple food in the tables of people. So in world wheat supply and demand, again this year with 827 million tons of production, we had a record high wheat production. So and the consumption stock to use ratio is 34%. So that's a very comfortable zone we have. So we have good news now. What's the next news? I will not say bad, I will not say good, but the increase of efficiency is decreasing. Not efficiency is decreasing. The increasing ratio, trend of efficiency is decreasing. Because, yeah, after 1960s, we can call it the reform or evolution of agriculture, mostly with fertilizer industry, with the help of fertilizer industry, then pesticides, we saw an extraordinary period of increasing yields. But because of now more environmental aspects, and it gets, because of the climate change, it gets harder to keep up the same yield increase over the years. Yeah, one big reason is the topic of today, climate change. When temperatures increasing 1.5 degrees over the world, they are giving stress to the crops, so that the challenge, the agricultural industry is to cope up with that, with new technologies, varieties, in this new more hot world. So then another good news that there is a global warming of 1.5 degrees, but it's not affecting all countries in a bad way, because some countries become from cold to a bit more mild weather conditions, which may help production as well. So we see Russia as the main wheat originating country over the world, exporting up to one third of all, or a quarter of the world wheat trade, so stays as the wheat silo for all the world. So some countries increase their production, and on the right hand you see the importer countries, which are mostly emerging markets because of their quickly increasing population. So these two countries, two areas of production and consumption should be connected with the trade lines. So the previous panelist geopolitics talks is something about it. Yes, world still producing enough food, grains, but where are they produced? They are not produced homogeneously over the all nations or populations. So the trade routes should work to keep the world food security strong. Yeah. Then let's move to the flour, my industry. Yeah, the 60-70% of 65% of the whole wheat is used for wheat flour production, and just 10 to 15 million tons of it is traded between countries, because most of the countries are self-sufficient for flour production because it's a strategic, critical main food for the countries. So where it is exported is the countries who don't have enough wheat supply, who don't have enough energy supply to make production. So most of them are low-income countries over the world. So Turkey, when we come to Turkey is the 10th, 11th biggest nation to produce wheat over the world. A strong wheat producer, mainly in central Anatolia, and a very well established warehousing system with 25 million tons of storage capacity, in which we produce 20 million tons of wheat. So ability to stock the goods, and then ability to process these goods with 28 million tons of capacity. So but not only our capacity in Turkey is important, also the location. As Mr. Bilal Erdoğan mentioned, I mean, we are in a geography that near to everywhere. So, but when we translate it to our industry, it means we are in between the producing countries, Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria. These four countries is exporting 75-80 million tons of wheat to the world, in which the total world wheat trade is 200 million tons. So we are in between the producing countries, Black Sea, and the consumer countries, especially Egypt, North Africa, Middle East. So thanks to this location, Turkey is the ranking first flour exporter over the world for 12 years with 20 to 25% market share. And yeah, and what we import to Turkey as wheat is 98-99% from Russia and Ukraine, but mostly dominated by Russian origin wheat. So lastly, we are getting closer to the end. What we do in my company, yeah, we are also a flour exporter. Our company established on 1969, started as a family company. Now it's publicly listed with close to 5,000 per day production capacity. Turkey's fourth largest food company. So flour mills are located in different, spread over the Turkish map to benefit the logistics. And the rest is the warehouses, the renewable energy and other production facilities. And special news for today's participants, we, a year ago, in our strategy to go downstream in the value chain, we acquired Pastificio Mediterranee in Italy, in Alessandria. So now we produtta pasta in Italia, le deliciosa pasta in El Mundo. Yeah, made in Italy. And also a bread production facility in United States. So as you see, when you are a food supplier, it's not just a corporation business, but we need to serve the food security of the world. So what we do for these sustainable initiatives in food production, in reaction to climate change, renewable energy, seed breeding projects which are more resistant to the high temperature and drought, and contract farming programs. So we have solar panels to avoid 20,000 tons of carbon emission a year, wind power plants to avoid 14,000 emission a year, carbon dioxide emission a year, which totally produce our energy which we use in our factories. So they are spread around the Turkish map again. Yeah, the seed breeding project is done with a government entity for Field Crops Central Research Institute to produce climate resilient new species, and this species is produced, given to farmers in Turkey under our contract farming program to be produced with regenerative and the technological farming applications, because when you recall the beginning of the presentation, yes, good news, we cannot increase the arable land, but we can increase the yield. So the intersection now, the challenge is now to keep up, to continue with the same level of yield increase for the upcoming years. So I will say lastly that we are very optimistic about, you hear always world will 10 billion in 2050, and so how we will feed these people. But the world was on 1960, 3.6 billion. Now we are 8, and we can still feed the people, and I'm very optimistic that the agriculture and food industry will be able to react the climate change with the technology. Thank you so much.
Спасибо, Eren, Günhan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You have demonstrated the great success of Russia in the past years, and Russia has turned into an exporter, although previously it was importing, and you emphasized our trade ties and cooperation, that we have been working closely together. Although, despite the increased yields, we still fall into the same trap. We increase the production, but then the profitability goes down, the prices go down, the farmers and agro holdings suffer, and then we reduce the production, and then again there's some deficit in the market. So the question is how we can get out of this trap. And I would like to draw attention to the fact that one more Turkish participant couldn't join this panel. That is why we provided more time to the representative of Turkey. And now I'm happy to pass the floor to Stefan Duerr, who is a CEO of EkoNiva, and Stefan is going to demonstrate a totally different segment of the agricultural complex. If you allow me, I would continue in English.
In the room, so I would ask for speaking in English. We are in the vertically integrated agricultural holding in Russia, though I'm actually born in Germany, as you may hear by my accent. We farm more than 600,000 hectares of land, have more than 120,000 dairy cows, produce a little bit less than 1.5 million tons of milk, processing in 5 plants, and the revenue about a little bit over $1 billion, producing 1 million tons of grain in addition, actually. And also like some lentils, which we export partly to Turkey. We farm in different regions, which is not only geographical, but also different climate regions. We are by far the largest dairy farmer in Russia and number 3 in the world with our cows. We produce in quite at a state-of-the-art or very high-level production level. But of course, we affect environment by manure, by pesticides, by plowing, which we may reduce, coming to this a little bit later. And we have a lot of cows, which produce methane. About 500 kilograms of methane per cow and year, which is the equivalent to something like 12.5 ton CO2 per year. In Russia, we already pay 160 rubles, about 1.7 euro per ton of methane, which is not so much and means for us a little bit less than 1 kopeck per kilogram of raw milk in Russia. This is quite reasonable. If we would pay for the CO2, like in Europe, which I think, if I'm right, the rate is something like 55 euros per ton of CO2 emission, then we would pay 650 euros per cow and year, which is about 4 euro cent or 5.5 rubles per kilogram of milk, which is already would be a price or cost increase about 10-12%. This is really something which would impact us very much, and the consumer, of course. Climate change affects environment. It has both, as also already said, Günhan, it has positive and negative impacts. The negative is more in our southern regions. The weather becomes less stable and less predictable, more frosts, droughts. The precipitation patterns are very different now. But we have also the rain, and the temperature increase also gives us better yields, like in the Volga region, which was very dry before. Now we are very good in participation, have yields, the same yields level as in the black soil region. And the temperature increase allows us to grow soybean and corn in Siberia, which we could not imagine even 10, 15 years ago. If you see now in our corn in Siberia, we have bears which are in the corn. They're eating, they like the corn, they didn't know it before. In Europe you have the wild swine. In Siberia we have the bears now in the corn. They like it very much, unfortunately. When we talk about methane emissions, it's something, now a little bit lack of time, but there were much more. I do not want to say there's no climate change. There definitely is climate change. But what is the role of the cows? We had much more, like bisons and zebra and these animals, elephants, all ruminants make the methane. And there were much, much more of them 1,000 years ago, hundreds years ago, than there are cows now. So to make the cows responsible for the climate change is a little bit maybe tricky. What do we do to minimize? Of course, we have to minimize the impact. We do input, for example, the manure into the soil, under the soil, to reduce the emission. We increase the organic substance very much. We do a lot of liming to increase the pH in the soil. And we still experiment, because we didn't find a solution, is with bioactive substance in the manure storage to keep the methane in the manure, because, yeah. In addition, we do a lot of smart farming to decrease the chemical input, natural feed from the region, green energy, and hybrid farm machinery. So the tractor you see above, the Chinese one, is a hybrid one. We do also publicization, our milk, with more than 100,000 visitors last year on our farms. And we have also one farm which is organic, and we want to increase the organic farming, which helps hopefully also to make the climate better. Healthy soil, healthy cows, delicious food, sustainable climate. What will we do now for the future? We try to, or we will further build farms, and try to make it with less negative impact, as you see with the manure putting in the soil, the liming. We think in Russia we have the responsibility to feed the world with so much land. What we are doing now to export the milk, Russia now is more or less milk sufficient. To export the milk, we make a factory for protein ingredients for export to other countries. And we grow a lot of legumes. As I said, it's peas, it's chickpeas, and it's lentils, what we like very much, and which we export also to a lot of countries, including Turkey. Thank you very much for your attention.
Stefan, огромное
Stefan, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for demonstrating that climate change, especially for agri-holdings and for agriculture, it has both positive and negative aspects. And I would like to explain for the audience what is the meaning and effect of methane. All specialists in climate change, they speak about CO2 and other greenhouse gases, but the major thing here is methane, because methane provides 100-fold effect on climate change in comparison with CO2. At the beginning, I was promising that we will have food and entertainment in this session. And now I'm going to introduce the representative of the company producing wines, Pierluigi Bolla. So we all love your wine, especially women love it.
Thank you. When we talk about wines, we talk about history, culture, and of course we need also to talk about innovation, economy, and tackle the big changes that our industry is undergoing. My family started making wine in 1883. Today we produce 25 million bottles at 3 plants in the region of Veneto, Verona, Valdo, and in Friuli near Pordenone. I will give you some information in general terms. We are faced with a market today that is experiencing 3 mega trends. The first, climate change for sure. Then we see technological innovation, which doesn't only mean product innovation, but also AI to improve processes in our production. But also, on the one hand, we have a lower and lower wine consumption and a greater and greater offer of wine in the world. We are currently seen explants of vineyards in California. They are removing the plants, and the same is happening in France. This is a big problem. In the United States, we can explantate whenever you want because there are no specific rules. Instead, in Europe, we have very strict rules on explantation. When a farmer explants its vineyards, well, they loses the right over those vineyards, which means that in the future, they will no longer be able to plant again vineyards. They need to change the crops. This is the scenario where we currently find ourselves. Climate change is a challenge that we tackle with realism, with a realistic approach. Unfortunately, it does have significant impacts on our industry. I remember when I was 12, 13 years old, and I would go ski with my uncle on the hills near Verona, the hills near Treviso. Well, now we don't see any snow at all. You know that in order to have good wine, you need a lot of temperature difference between the day and night. Today, unfortunately, we go through long periods of drought, a lot of heat, which has a negative impact because this increases the alcohol content of wine in a world that drinks less and drinks less alcohol. So that is a problem. Technological innovation can help. So next year we will be able to launch on the market 2 alcohol-free Spumanti and 1 white wine, again alcohol-free. Our grandparents will probably turn in their graves, but this is the change brought about by modernity. Consumption has changed. Moisture has changed. Higher temperatures, as I said, this all decreases production, and in some cases, this also means less revenues, which is very detrimental to farmers. Most importantly, we see the rise of diseases such as peronospora and other diseases, botrytis, that hit the vineyards. In many cases, farmers are forced to remove the plant, replace it, wait 2 or 3 years before the plants can bloom again and become productive again. How can we behave in face with these changes? Well, we can try and bring our vineyards to higher lands where the temperature is slightly colder. At the same time, we can choose wine varieties that are more resilient to climate. In order to do that, we need to first change production rules and regulations. We need to change the laws because they were decided in Europe at the end of the 1970s when the conditions were different. Also, we need to change our traditions. There is a tradition and culture behind wines. There are conflicting interests as well. Think of private companies and cooperatives. So this is not going to be easy. It will take a long time. But if we want to safeguard our planet and improve sustainability, this is what we need to do. So we are committed to try and respond to the changed conditions. We are very much committed as producers. Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, I can only confirm that traditions evolve and change, and I see it firsthand on the example of my students. They clearly drink considerably less alcohol than our generation, and most probably most of the people seated in this audience. While I was preparing for this session, I gathered my students and I conducted a small sociological survey using them. And the outcomes turned out to be very surprising to me. I asked my students a question. What is it that you value most? The satisfaction that you experience once you've saturated yourself spiritually, or the satisfaction you experience when you've had a delicious food and you saturated your hunger, or is that a feeling of sexual pleasure, or the pleasure of being left alone? What is the most important for them out of the three options? And I was surprised to figure out that 85% of the students told me that what they value most is the spiritual satisfaction. At first I was surprised, but right now I made sure once again that indeed, if food security matters are resolved, if food is available in abundance, then you can consume spiritual pleasures. And this is what I'd like to wish all of us.
Наше самое главное, но короткая
And
сессия
our
закончена.
most important
Спасибо
but brief
большое.
session is now completed. Thank you very much for your attention.